To understand why pelvic imbalance becomes so common after the age of 50, we must first appreciate the remarkable design of the human pelvis. It is not simply a rigid structure of bone that connects the upper body to the legs. It is a living center of coordination where muscles, joints, nerves, and connective tissues interact continuously to guide the way we move. Every step we take begins here. The pelvis acts like a central hub, transferring energy between the spine above and the legs below. When this system is balanced, walking feels smooth and natural, almost effortless. The glute muscles contract at the right moment, the hips extend gracefully, and the spine remains stable yet flexible. But when the pelvis gradually shifts out of its natural alignment, the entire chain of movement begins to change in subtle ways. Many people do not notice when this shift first begins. It happens slowly, often over many years of daily habits that seem harmless. Long periods of sitting, whether at a desk, in a car, or on a couch, quietly alter the way the hips function. When the body remains seated for extended time, the muscles at the front of the hips shorten while the muscles at the back of the hips, particularly the glutes, become less active. The nervous system adapts to this pattern and begins to treat it as normal. As a result, when a person stands or walks, the pelvis may tilt slightly forward or rotate just enough to disrupt the natural balance of forces that should pass through the hips and spine. This forward tilt, often called anterior pelvic positioning, changes the relationship between the pelvis and the lower spine. Instead of the glutes providing the primary force for extending the hips during walking or climbing stairs, the lower back muscles begin to compensate. The hamstrings also attempt to assist, working harder than they were designed to. Over time, this compensation can create a chain reaction throughout the body. The lower back feels tight or fatigued, the hips feel stiff, and walking begins to lose the smooth rhythm it once had. Some people describe it as feeling slightly unstable, or as if their legs are not fully supporting them. What makes pelvic imbalance particularly interesting from a scientific perspective is that it is rarely caused by a single weak muscle. Instead, it reflects a disruption in communication between muscle groups. The glutes, hip flexors, core muscles, and lower back all operate as part of a coordinated system. When one group becomes underactive and another becomes overactive, the pelvis shifts in response. This shift alters the mechanics of movement, which in turn reinforces the imbalance through repeated daily actions. Another important factor is the nervous system's tendency to prioritize efficiency over ideal mechanics. The brain is constantly searching for the easiest way to accomplish a movement. If certain muscles become easier to activate because they are used more frequently, the brain will rely on them even if they are not the most appropriate muscles for the task. Over years, this creates patterns that feel natural but are actually inefficient. The glutes may gradually stop contributing fully to movement, leaving other muscles to absorb stress they were not meant to handle. Age itself is not the true cause of this imbalance. Rather, age simply reflects the accumulation of these movement patterns over time. The encouraging truth is that the body remains adaptable. When the pelvis is guided back toward its natural alignment and the glutes are reintroduced as primary movers, the entire system begins to reorganize. Muscles that had become quiet can become active again, and movements that once felt strained can regain a sense of fluidity. The pelvis returns to its role as the stable center from which the body generates strength and motion. The glute bridge appears almost too simple to be powerful, yet within this quiet movement lies a profound conversation between the brain and the body. To understand why this exercise is so important, we must first recognize the role the glute muscles play in human movement. The glutes are not just muscles that shape the back of the body. They are the largest and most powerful muscle group, responsible for extending the hips, stabilizing the pelvis, and protecting the lower spine. When functioning properly, they act like engines that propel the body forward with strength and efficiency. But as the years pass, especially in a lifestyle dominated by sitting, these engines begin to idle. When the body spends long hours seated, the hips remain flexed, and the glute muscles remain lengthened, but inactive. Over time, the nervous system reduces its communication with them. This does not mean the muscles disappear, but rather that their ability to activate quickly and effectively begins to fade. Scientists sometimes describe this phenomenon as glute inhibition, where the brain gradually forgets how to recruit these muscles during everyday movements. As a result, other muscles, particularly the hamstrings and the lower back, step in to perform tasks that the glutes were designed to handle. This substitution might work for a while, but it creates inefficiency and strain, especially as the body ages. The glute bridge serves as a gentle yet powerful reset for this system. Lying on the back with the knees bent and feet placed firmly on the floor creates a position where gravity supports the spine and removes unnecessary tension from the body. In this position, the pelvis naturally settles closer to a neutral alignment. When a person slowly presses their heels into the ground and lifts the hips upward, something important begins to happen. The glutes are asked to contract in their natural role of extending the hips. Unlike standing exercises that require balance and coordination, the glute bridge isolates this movement pattern in a way that allows the brain to focus entirely on activating the correct muscles. What makes this movement particularly fascinating is how it reawakens neural pathways. Muscles respond to signals from the nervous system, and those signals become stronger when a movement is repeated with awareness. Time the hips lift and the glutes engage, the brain receives feedback that these muscles are active and capable. Gradually, the nervous system begins to restore its connection with them, which is less about building muscle size and more about rebuilding communication within the body. Another subtle benefit of the glute bridge lies in how it stabilizes the pelvis. As the hips rise, the glutes and surrounding muscles form a supportive structure around the pelvis and lower spine. This stability reduces the tendency for the lower back to overextend, a common problem when the glutes are weak. Instead of the spine absorbing excessive force, the power is distributed through the hips where it belongs. Over time, this redistribution of effort begins to change how the body moves during daily activities like walking, climbing stairs, or standing up from a chair. Breathing also plays an important role in this movement. When performed slowly and with controlled breathing, the deep muscles of the abdomen and pelvic floor naturally participate in stabilizing the body. This creates a coordinated system of support that surrounds the pelvis from all directions. The glutes provide strength from behind, the core offers stability from the front, and the pelvis becomes a balanced center once again. With consistent practice, the glute bridge becomes more than an exercise performed on the floor. It becomes a reminder to the body of its original design, encouraging muscles that had grown quiet to rejoin the symphony of movement that allows the human body to walk, stand, and move with strength and quiet confidence. There is a quiet but powerful influence on the position of the pelvis that many people rarely think about, and it lives at the front of the hips. These are the hip flexor muscles, a group of muscles that connect the upper thigh to the pelvis and the lower spine. Their role in the body is essential. They help lift the leg when we walk, climb stairs, or step forward. In a balanced body, these muscles work in harmony with the glutes, forming a kind of partnership between the front and the back of the hips. One group shortens, while the other lengthens, allowing the pelvis to move smoothly and efficiently. But when this balance begins to shift, the pelvis itself begins to change position in subtle but meaningful ways. Modern lifestyles create the perfect environment for hip flexor tightness. Sitting for long periods places the hips in a constantly flexed position, which gradually teaches these muscles to remain shortened. Over time, the body begins to treat this shortened position as normal. The hip flexors become stiff and resistant to lengthening, and this stiffness gently pulls the pelvis forward. The result is a posture in which the pelvis tilts slightly toward the front of the body, increasing the curve of the lower spine. Many people feel this as tightness in the front of the hips or pressure in the lower back, but the deeper issue lies in how this posture disrupts the natural balance of the entire movement system. When the pelvis tilts forward, the glutes find themselves in a disadvantaged position. Muscles generate strength most effectively when they are able to contract through their full range of motion. But when the pelvis is pulled forward by tight hip flexors, the glutes are placed in a lengthened and weakened state. They struggle to activate with the same strength and timing that they once had. This forces other muscles, particularly the lower back and hamstrings, to compensate during movements like standing, walking, or lifting. The body continues to move, but it does so with less efficiency and more strain. The kneeling hip flexor stretch offers a simple yet profound way to reverse this pattern. In this position, One knee rests on the ground, while the other foot stands in front of the body. As the hips gently move forward, the front of the hip on the kneeling side begins to lengthen. This lengthening sends a signal to the nervous system that the hip flexor muscles can safely relax. However, the true power of this movement appears when the glutes of the kneeling leg are gently activated at the same time. By lightly squeezing the glutes, the body creates a natural opposition. The front of the hip lengthens while the back of the hip engages. This combination is important because the body rarely responds well to stretching alone. Muscles that release tension need another muscle group to provide stability and control. When the glutes activate during this stretch, they help guide the pelvis back toward a more neutral alignment. The pelvis begins to settle into a position where the spine can stack naturally above it and the hips can move freely below it. It is not a forceful correction, but a gradual rebalancing guided by the body's own design. Breathing quietly deepens the effect of this movement. Slow breaths allow the nervous system to relax and reduce the protective tension that often builds around tight muscles. With each breath, the hips soften slightly, the pelvis finds a more comfortable position, and the body learns that this alignment is both safe and sustainable. Over time, repeated exposure to this position begins to reshape the body's resting posture. As the hip flexors regain their natural length and the glutes reclaim their role as stabilizers, the pelvis becomes less rigid and more responsive. Walking begins to feel smoother, standing requires less effort, and the lower back no longer carries the burden it once did.
Ow.
The body gradually remembers how the front and back of the hips are meant to cooperate, storing a quiet balance that allows movement to unfold with strength, freedom, and ease. One of the most overlooked truths about the human body is that it was designed for motion that flows through space, not simply motion that happens in place. Walking, climbing, reaching, and stepping are patterns the body has practiced since childhood. Yet with time, especially after the age of 50, many people begin to move more cautiously.
Ow.
Movements that challenge balance or require stepping backward or downward are gradually avoided. The body adapts to this reduced range of motion, and slowly the hips lose some of their natural strength and coordination. This is where the step-back lunge becomes such a powerful tool, not because it is dramatic or intense, but because it reintroduces the body to a movement pattern that mirrors the mechanics of natural walking. When we take a step backward, something subtle but important occurs within the hips and pelvis. The leg that moves behind the body begins to extend, encouraging the glutes to activate in their primary role as hip extensors. At the same time, the front leg bends slightly, allowing the hips to lower in a controlled and balanced way. The pelvis must stabilize between the two legs, which encourages the deep muscles around the hips and core to work together. This coordination is what allows the body to maintain balance and control while transferring weight from one side to the other. What makes the backward step particularly valuable for people over 50 is the way it distributes force through the body. Forward lunges often place a larger share of pressure on the knees, especially if the hips are weak or the pelvis is unstable. Stepping backward shifts more of the workload toward the glutes and hips, which are better equipped to generate and absorb force. The knee of the front leg remains in a safer position, while the hips take on the role they were naturally designed to perform. This subtle shift in mechanics allows people to strengthen the muscles around the pelvis without placing unnecessary strain on vulnerable joints. Balance also plays an important role in this movement. As the body steps backward, it briefly enters a moment where weight is shared between two different positions. The brain must coordinate the muscles of the hips, legs, and core to prevent wobbling or instability. These tiny adjustments are not random. They represent the nervous system refining its understanding of where the body is in space. Scientists call this process proprioception, the internal sense that tells the brain how the body is positioned and how it is moving. Over time, movements that challenge balance strengthen this internal awareness, helping people feel steadier and more confident when walking or changing direction. Another fascinating aspect of the step-back lunge is how it restores the natural rhythm between the pelvis and the legs. When one leg moves behind the body, the glutes of that leg engage to support the hip. Meanwhile, the pelvis must remain relatively level so that the spine stays stable. This encourages the body to develop symmetry, reducing the tendency to favor one side over the other. Many people unknowingly rely more heavily on one leg due to past injuries, habits, or subtle imbalances. Repeating controlled step-back movements helps the body rediscover equal strength and coordination between both sides. The pace of the movement matters more than the depth. Moving slowly allows the muscles and joints to coordinate their actions without rushing. Each step becomes a deliberate act of balance, strength, and control. The body learns to trust its own stability again, and with repetition, the hips begin to move with greater confidence. Walking gradually becomes stronger because the glutes are now contributing their full power with every step. As the body practices this pattern repeatedly, the pelvis regains its ability to stabilize movement while the legs generate force. The result is not just stronger muscles, but a more harmonious relationship between balance, coordination, and motion. The body begins to move through space with the quiet assurance that comes from muscles, working together rather than struggling against one another. There is a remarkable truth about the human body that often becomes more visible with age. Muscles are only part of the story of movement. Behind every contraction, every step, every moment of balance, there is a network of communication flowing through the nervous system. The brain is constantly sending signals to muscles, deciding which ones should activate, how strongly they should contract, and when they should relax, when the body moves efficiently. These signals travel through well-established pathways that have been reinforced through years of repetition. But when movement patterns change, whether from inactivity, injury, or long periods of sitting, the brain quietly rewires those pathways. Certain muscles receive less attention, while others are asked to take on greater responsibility. This is why many people after 50 feel as if their bodies have become weaker, even when the muscles themselves are still capable of strength. In many cases, the issue is not simply muscle loss, but communication loss. The brain has gradually reduced its signals to certain muscles, particularly those that are no longer being used regularly. The glutes are a perfect example. Despite being the largest muscles in the body, they often become surprisingly inactive when daily movement becomes limited or repetitive. The nervous system begins to rely more heavily on the lower back, the hip flexors, or the hamstrings to perform tasks that the glutes once handled with ease. The encouraging news is that the brain remains adaptable throughout life. Scientists describe this ability as neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize and strengthen connections in response to new experiences. When a person begins practicing movements that intentionally activate the glutes and stabilize the pelvis, the brain gradually starts to rebuild its communication with those muscles. At first, the signals may feel weak or unfamiliar. The movement may require concentration, and the muscles may fatigue quickly. But with repetition, the nervous system begins to recognize these patterns again and sends stronger, or coordinated signals. Each repetition of a well-performed movement acts like a message traveling through the body. The brain observes the result, receives sensory feedback from the muscles and joints, and adjusts its instructions for the next attempt. This feedback loop is one of the most sophisticated learning systems in biology. It allows the body to refine its movements gradually, improving coordination and efficiency without conscious calculation. Over time, the brain learns that activating the glutes earlier and more strongly creates a smoother and more stable movement pattern. The pelvis begins to stabilize naturally, and the surrounding muscles organize themselves around this improved alignment. Consistency plays a powerful role in this process. The nervous system responds best not to occasional bursts of activity, but to steady repetition over time. When the same movements are practiced regularly, the neural pathways responsible for those actions become stronger and faster. Signals travel more efficiently from the brain to the muscles, and the body begins to perform these movements automatically without the need for constant attention. What once required effort and focus gradually becomes a natural part of everyday motion. Another important element is awareness. Moving with attention encourages the brain to fully engage with the muscles involved. When a person focuses on feeling the glutes contract, the hips stabilize, and the pelvis remain balanced, the sensory information reaching the brain becomes richer and more precise. This heightened awareness strengthens the connection between intention and movement, allowing the nervous system to refine its control over the body. Over weeks and months, these small adjustments accumulate into meaningful change. Walking begins to feel stronger because the glutes are once again contributing their full power. The pelvis stabilizes more naturally, reducing unnecessary strain on the lower back. Balance improves as the nervous system becomes more confident in coordinating the muscles around the hips and core. What initially seemed like simple exercises gradually reshape the way the entire body organizes movement, allowing strength, stability, and coordination to reappear in ways that feel both natural and deeply reassuring.